Hello everybody, my name is Inar. This is Boost Career today, and in this project I'm meeting with different people working in different industries to ask them about questions on what got them where they are today. Um, our first guest is an employee at Google. He managed to get the job right out of university in the times of pandemic. I think this is really cool. There are a lot of people who want to know how to do this, how to get into Google, especially how to find a job in the times of pandemic. So he's gonna answer all of our questions. Get comfortable, grab coffee. I'm confident that you're gonna enjoy this. All right, let's do it. It's great to have you here, brother. It's great to have you. I think the best way to start this would be by you just introducing yourself, what you do, and etc. What's your work about?
For sure, yeah. So I'm Faesal. Thanks for having me. I just graduated from University of Victoria like 5 months ago, and I've been working at Google as a site reliability engineer, which is um, which is a section of their software engineering pipeline. And yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with it so far.
So you mentioned that you graduated early, right? Like recently. And I think I don't know when people will be watching this video. If they're watching in a year or two, it's very important to mention that it's time of pandemic. So it's really hard for everybody to find a job. Can you just walk me through the process of you finding a job? What did you do? How did you approach it?
Yeah, so the problem for me was that I had interned at Google last year, and so my resume was pretty good, but because of the pandemic, the only companies that were hiring were really good companies too. So they were like Google or Facebook or like Airbnb. They were really like high-end companies that have thousands of people like competing for them. And so it either basically meant I'll get a really good job or no job, which was sort of a problem. Yeah, it was really competitive. I applied for maybe like 100 places, got interviews at like 15 or so of them, and then got offers from like two or three at the end, which I ended up with Google, like picking them.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Do you feel like you had to do anything different because there was this increased competition this time around?
Yeah, I mean, I actually had to like craft my resume well and like put in a lot of effort into it, which I never had to before. Like my only experience with internships, but including to get my Google internship, I never thought that I had to like put in any sort of like extreme effort into studying or into prepping for interviews or into like again crafting a perfect resume that's read in like 5 seconds and it looks great or making a personal portfolio. I never had a personal website, but then now I had to because I was like, well, it looks better. Yeah.
Oh, so those are some of the things that people can do, right? Like personal website with potential portfolio
I
if they're
mean,
developers. So
yeah,
that's the type of
you
positions you
you
do.
try yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you are trying to like look like you care. I mean, ideally you care. You don't have to pretend you are, but like you want to give the impression that you care about what you're doing and that you're not just kind of you just did your coursework and then you graduated and now you're going to get a job and that's just the stream. You want to kind of try to do things on the side. So like personal projects or yeah, just even having a website, which really only takes like 30 minutes to do or something. So that kind of stuff is not it's not that difficult.
And I would imagine most developers would know how to build their websites, but just in
Yeah.
case if we have non-technical people watching,
Yeah.
what's the fastest way to build one? Like what did you use to do it?
Um,
How did
what
you set it up, I guess?
I mean like I don't really know how to I didn't know how to build a website either. I just ended up getting a you can go on a website called HTML5 up I believe or anything like that that will give you like templates basically. And at that point you can just open them in any like editor and just copy paste your things to where you want them to appear because everything is already formatted. So it just becomes copy and paste. And then you just kind of get that all done
Mhm.
and then from there, yeah, you can find somewhere to host it. They're free. Or if you want, you can go kind of and get like a Wix website or like a Squarespace website, anything like that. And that's even easier. But if you're in the tech industry, I feel like you should know how to make an HTML website and host it. Like that seems way more preferable than if you just use a service for that.
100%. That's 100%. You also mentioned that you had to work a lot on your resume. I would imagine since all this happened recently, you would remember some of the things on resume that you had to do
Yeah.
different. Can you give some
Yeah.
tips to people doing it right now?
Yeah. So you're trying to be, I think the big one is you really want to be like result oriented and you want to be like concise and precise. And what that means is, um, I think in some of Google's videos, they actually say this also. That depends on the recruiter. You're trying to basically have an XYZ format, which is like all your bullets should look something like I did X using Y resulting in Z, or some sort of variety of that. You can switch the order of the X, Y, Z for flair, but if you want to like quantify your impact
Mhm.
and show how you did it instead of just kind of describing your job basically. You don't want to just say, well, I developed test automation, for example, because that's just the job description. That doesn't say anything. And it's
You want to
not,
give numbers?
yeah, you want to try to give numbers as much as you can, and you want to show your individual like contributions as much as possible instead of just like reiterating the job description, because a lot of times that's actually really vague and it's really talking about what the company itself is doing, which doesn't actually really like translate directly. Like I wouldn't be able to just say, well, I kept Google reliable, and it's like, well, no, tens of thousands of people did that, and like I don't know which part of, like you have to quantify what you did, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now I'm gonna ask you a question that I think many people ask you. You probably got it asked in an interview as well. Why Google?
Oh, oh yeah.
What's
I
your
mean,
personal reason to choose Google? Like I know
um,
many people choose Google, but
yeah. I mean, yeah. Like so, for me, I just wanted a company that I can really push myself in. I wanted something that is cutting edge, and I think Google is just that. I didn't want to work at like in some sort of legacy technology. I wanted to be at the forefront of what's being developed. And Google, specifically like Google SRE, are the people that wrote the book on SRE. Like that's what everyone follows, and I want to see how that's all done. So it was like just a really really interesting role to be
to be
working
part of.
on. Yeah, to be like working on how Google like keeps things reliable. It's also like a very flexible job. So like there's a lot of like internal mobility, and if I feel like this isn't my thing, I can transfer to a different part of Google, and it's big enough that it's bound that there's something that's interesting. So I think overall it's a win-win, and the work-life balance is great and everything. The culture is great, really.
No, I think so as well. And there's a lot of people who really want to get into Google, and the competition is pretty tough. What do you think is the most challenging thing in preparation specifically for Google? Because there's multiple rounds they put you through, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it all start, at least for me, the big deal was just knowing that you had to prepare in a certain type of way. So like they ask you a lot of like, data structures and algorithm questions. And the first time I applied to Google, I got rejected because I did not know what that meant. And I just went back to like my class slides and relearned how Quicksort works because I just thought that's what that meant, because that's like a data structure and algorithm. So, um, but no, you have to practice. And I think the biggest challenge is if you're in an environment like UVic, for example, if no one talks about it, then you're not going to know it by yourself. And on the opposite end, if you're at like Berkeley, they have classes that just teach you this stuff. So like you for sure will know it. And so it's all about like your environment. And if you don't hear from your environment, then it's on you to kind of learn to do that.
And I think there's also a moment like I definitely remember doing it in UVic, like in the second year, but I think you kind of learn it and you don't really understand the importance of it. You just like learn it like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
Quicksort, it works like this,
Yeah.
but there's no emphasis that, hey, I would actually need this in my job search. So
Yeah.
it is, I think, good that you mentioned that, yeah, we need to look beyond our university education
Yeah.
for those things. Um, I think you kind of gave us tips in terms of how to find a job, how to get a good job, but specifically for Google, because there will be a lot of people who are very, very excited about Google. Even when I told them I'm going to interview you, there were a lot of people who really want to get into Google.
Yeah.
Specifically for Google, what do you think people should do differently? What do you think you helped you?
Right. So obviously, like, I'm not a Google spokesperson here, but what worked for me is, um, I think being able of learning is a big one, and that is something you want to show. So, like I said, I did not get accepted the first time around, but I guess I showed enough potential that they invited me to apply again. And so they came to me and they're like, "Oh, you should do this again." And I went there and did that. And I think it's a lot more also of a holistic process, which I really appreciate. So like um for like full time, you have behavioral interviews and you have also technical interviews. So it's not that you can just be like a code whiz and be someone that I really would hate working with and we would hire you. That you have to kind of be like a good combination of everything. I would super recommend communicating though. Like, I for sure did not get all of the questions that I was asked correctly. That is for sure. And so, but just know how to communicate your train of thought. I think when it comes to coding interviews, people like to just be quiet and actually, like, because you don't want to say something stupid, is I think the worry. But at the end of the day, the whole point is not for you to produce a perfect output by sitting there silently. It's for the interviewer to see how you think, and if that applies to the problems they're going to be solving at work. It's all about how you think. So I think I would just focus on talking, like, you're on the side of talking too much like I'm doing right now versus not
No, no, no,
talking
that's
at
great.
all.
I'm gonna ask you a question.
No, no, like, just keep like rambling is sort of better than you being quiet. When in doubt, I would just go with that. Yeah.
Oh no, that's awesome. I never thought about it. I'm also the one that gets quiet when there's a problem presented. Maybe I should talk more in those cases. Is there anything that surprised you about Google when you start working there? So, for example, I'll give you one example. Like when I did a co-op in government,
Mhm.
I didn't realize how typically the average age in government is higher than in private sector. I thought about it, but I never realized it till I actually got the job. And I remember I was like 19 in my first co-op there.
Mhm.
And people that were considered like in my age group were like 30.
Yeah.
So people that are like 40 and about, that
Right.
was surprising for
Right.
me about government job. What was
Yeah.
surprising about Google when you just got the job and started working there?
Um, I think it's really big and it's extremely complex, and you need to be okay with taking the time to learn. There is so, like, there's like, for example, I work on Google Cloud, and like Google Cloud is very, very complex with like a ton of intricate systems that we like. It's a big system, and so you need to be okay with the idea that you don't know anything and that it takes a lot of time to like learn, which is expected. You're onboarding, like, even until right now, I'm still like learning. I'm not good at, good yet. I'm not super productive. And that's perfectly okay. So I think I was pretty surprised that it seems like it's a long-term investment in you. And if you're not really useful for the first 3 or 4 months, that really doesn't mean anything. If you're going to be around for a few years and be productive in like the tail end of thing, they're really happy to have you with that.
And I think that's what big companies do, right? They raise their own talent, and
Mm,
that's really awesome. And I want to ask you about this specifically because you did mention that they help you grow.
mm,
So mentorship at Google is a very famous thing. Many people talk about it. What's your
mm.
experience with it? Like, did you get any opportunities with mentorship at Google?
Yeah, so like I have a bunch of mentors that are assigned to me, and I can pick more if I want to. We have a lot of programs where you can sign up for more. Um, so I think I think it's really helpful because a lot of the times also they're not, like, there's mentors that are helping you onboard and get good at your job, and that is great. But there's also mentors that are just there that are not working on your team or your area whatsoever, and they're like, on a completely different realm in a completely different city. And I think just talking to them gives you like a lot more perspective, and then you can ask them more freely about like career advice or anything like that that you might feel uncomfortable talking to your like superior about. Um, so that's really helpful. But I think in terms of like technical mentorship about your job, I think it's very like it's grade A. It's very good. They know what they're doing, and like I said, there's a lot of there's a lot of effort invested in you, and everyone wants you to succeed, and there's no real like pressure for you to just need to perform right away. Everyone just wants you to grow into someone that's going to do well.
That's amazing. That I really enjoyed that. So to wrap up our interview, what are your final words for those of us who just, as I said, recently graduated, looking for that dream job, and I think you
Yeah.
landed that dream job. Just, you mentioned a lot of things, but a couple tips just in general.
I I think apply early and apply often is a good one. So I have no knowledge whatsoever of how hiring pipelines work, but from talking to recruiters at some career fairs and stuff, it seems like when you apply early, you end up being more likely to be interviewed because the spots wouldn't have filled up. So it tends to be on a rolling basis. They don't wait until the application is done and then they review. They're doing it as the applications come. Try to apply early, try to apply often. So really in an ideal world, if your if you just match all of your bullets on your resume to the bullets on a job and you like relate to them, you'll get an interview in an ideal world, but that doesn't end up happening. And so like, yes, while I got like a job at Google, I also got rejected without an interview for companies that were paying like $15 an hour. So there is no real guarantees on it. So I think you kind of want to just apply to enough companies that statistically you're going to be likely to have interviews, and then
Maximize the chances. I like
yeah,
that.
basically maximize your chances, because I do think at the end of the day, everyone should acknowledge that this process does have a lot of luck involved in it, and you're never like the most qualified candidate. There's a ton of qualified candidates for all sorts of jobs. It's just that you're just trying, like, a recruiter is going through like 10 qualified candidates and they're just going to pick someone, right? And you just want to be that someone, and the way to do that is just do it enough times that you're likely to be that person. um, I think that's that. I think also just keep metrics. I think that's what really helped me, and that's one more thing I did like during the pandemic, because
Mhm.
I didn't have a choice to fail. Like getting internships, like, oh, I'll just do classes. That's not a big deal. But this, I didn't want to live at my mom's place after I graduated. So I was like, well, okay, the odds are, the risk is higher here. So like keep
Yeah.
metrics, like keep an Excel sheet or a Google sheet of like, I applied here, I got an interview, whatever, and this is the resume I used or whatever. And then so
Mhm.
if you modify it down the road, you actually know that your changes are making it better or worse, versus just kind of, I don't know, getting like upset that you didn't get an interview and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go fix it. And you kind of end up making it worse. And so if you're keeping track of that, then you don't have to worry about any of it. You have data that's showing you
Mhm.
what your success rate is. And I personally was aiming for like a 10% interview rate. So like for 100 applications, I was really trying to like get 10
What
interviews, because
what
it
did
was,
what did you get? What was your percent? I'm just curious.
yeah, it was somewhere like 10-15%,
That's not bad.
not by meticulous planning. It just ended up being the way. Um, yeah. So you like, because if you're only getting like one interview out of 100 applications, like
That's right.
maybe it's the resume that's the problem and not your technical skills. So, go fix that.
Absolutely. Faisal, it was a pleasure having you here.
Yeah.
Everybody, this will be on multiple platforms. So regardless where it is, Instagram, YouTube, follow, subscribe, hit the like button. We'll put your Instagram handle or some other contact so that people can ask you questions if they want to.
Yeah.
Thank you, Faisal. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you hit that like button.
Awesome.